Welcome back to Meet at the Well. How are you doing today? I'm tired. It's a Sunday morning. We're recording. I feel like I'm in a spiritual hangover from church yesterday,
Mhm.
and then also kind of like a rough night parenting. A little bit,
A little bit.
a little bit. Lots of tears from all parties, but church was really good.
Church was really good.
Our church does this thing called Selah services, and Selah in Psalms is basically a moment of pause. So when you're reading Psalms, you'll see Selah mentioned, and it's an invitation for you to have a sacred pause, for you to take time just to meditate on the word. And our church does these specific services in the middle of their like series.
Hmm.
And last night was just complete. Like there was something in me, even though I had just started my period, that was like we needed to go. And I'm so glad. And I was resistant at first. I think that we don't talk about resistance in church. I was sitting like we were worshiping, and I was just like not feeling it. And then I closed my eyes and just let the worship songs like really come over me, and I could just feel myself softening and my heart softening. And then yeah, it was just amazing. Basically, so Saturday night services are a little bit smaller than the Sunday morning services, and we love that. We love the Saturday night vibe. So we went to the later Saturday night service, which is always a bit smaller. And at the end, we basically brought our worries, concerns, fears, just like things that are not in alignment to God, and His truth and His design for us. And we brought them up to the altar, and it was so cool because basically the whole congregation was on their knees or just like crying, um, and in worship, and it was really beautiful. So I feel like I'm in a little bit of a spiritual hangover. Also, day 2 of my cycle. So I have my nettle tea and all of the things. But how are you? You wrote a paper last night.
Hmm.
We are full people. You feel good?
What does that mean, full people?
Like we have like full schedules. It's just like a full life right now. It's full on.
Yeah, I was up pretty late last night.
Yeah. What are we talking about today?
God's order for marriage and why it still works.
I feel like this is going to shake some people. I definitely feel like this is an episode that you should listen to with your spouse. I don't think that this is something that you should, I mean, you can listen to this without them, but we have to come to an understanding that we're not on spiritual paths by ourselves. We're not like doing this solo. I think it's why so many relationships right now are fragmented. So, our invitation for you is for you to listen to this together as a couple, and for you to also take time afterwards to pray, read the word. We're going to utilize a lot of scripture today, but read the word and come into a conversation about what does it actually look like for you to follow God's order in marriage. There's so much, I think, distortion that comes with this. So we really want to break it down and invite couples to realize that this isn't just like an ancient way of marriage. God designed, and the greatest thing about the Bible, and this is what I've realized, is that the Word of God lives throughout generations.
Mm.
So nothing in the Word of God is for ancient times. It is always for the present, always for the now. So God didn't design marriage and say, oh yeah, in 2025 it's just not going to work anymore. No, it still works, and we both, husband and wife, have to submit ourselves to God's design. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Hmm.
You want to lead us off? Lead us not into temptation. You want me to read?
um, yeah, go ahead, because I have a lot of my notes and things here are a little sporadic.
Yeah.
Um, I definitely have some Bible verses here, and then I'm gonna pull a little bit from a book I've been reading, by a pastor. Um, and he's got a few books, but the title of this book is Disciples of a Godly Man.
Mm.
So I have some excerpts here that I'm going to pull from a little bit and just kind of tie into the episode. Because I've been reading this book off and on now for the last couple weeks, and there's some good information in there for sure. It really breaks things down. Um,
For men.
yeah, for men specifically, just makes it's a really easy read, and there's just some good nuggets in there. So I took some notes and jotted some things down as best as I could, kind of on the fly here. So yeah, if you want to take it away, and we'll just kind of riff off each other a little bit here.
Okay, so I pulled Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22 through 33, because I think to me, we actually read this many times in our couples devotional that we were doing in the morning.
Hmm.
And um, yeah, I think it's just like a really good set point for understanding how perfectly God designed marriage and the submission that's required on both ends. So I'm going to read this from the Bible. Um, and perfect. Ellie's not coming back till 2 or 3.
So we have
Amazing.
some time.
We have time. I was a little worried about that. Our daughter Elliot's with my parents right now. Okay. So it says in Ephesians chapter 5, and I'm going to kind of break this up as we talk about it, but it says, "Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body." And then it continues to say, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such things, but that she should be holy and without blemish. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself." So I'm going to pull more from this, but I think this is a good starting point because I feel like the way that I learned this is, and this was back when I was an angry feminist, and we'll just call it what it is.
Yeah, go on.
Was I only ever heard the first part. And I feel like that is what most people cling to, is that they're only hearing that first part of wives have to submit to their husbands,
Hmm.
and the husband has full control, full reign. But
Hmm.
what I love so much about this is that what Paul is saying in this letter is he's saying, no, husbands, you carry a burden and a responsibility, just like Jesus Christ carried a burden and responsibility and died for the church. And I think that when we look at it in that way, we don't just see women as submitting, but we're also seeing men and their responsibility. And truly, it is a burden for husbands. And I think that wives, like, we have to understand this, that by when we follow the Bible, it literally says husbands have to lay down their lives, be willing to lay down their lives for their wives.
Hmm.
And so this is where I think that, and to love, it says right here, love your wife as though you love your own flesh. It continues to say that no one hates their own bodies, right? And yeah, so I think it's like it's a responsibility on both parties.
Hmm.
And it also requires respect, but more than anything, it requires submission, right? A wife submitting to her husband with the knowing
Hmm.
that her husband is going to purify her, honor her, love her, present her as the best possible version of herself, which means husbands want their wives to be taken care of, and also that they are willing to lay their lives down for their wives.
Yeah, that's good because actually that same Bible verse, Ephesians chapter 5, 22 through 33.
Mm-hmm.
The author of this book, I believe his first name is Robert Kent Hughes. Um, I'll have to double check on that because I think it shows the first initial of his his name, and I just kind of jumped right into the book. But essentially, what he said was that Ephesians chapter 5:22 through 33 establishes a pattern for spiritual order.
Mm,
So think of it as like Christ is the head of the church,
yeah.
and the husband is the head of the wife.
Mm,
So he went on to write that headship without love is tyranny, and submission without love is slavery.
mm,
So I think that kind of ties in with what you were saying. So headship meaning taking responsibility, um, and leading through example. So think prayer and sacrifice, right?
mhm,
So I think when a husband models Christ's leadership,
mhm.
he doesn't necessarily dominate. Um, and I think he mentioned in the book, he kind of put it in terms of like dying to himself daily
Yeah.
and absorbing the pressure in the household so that his wife and children can live in peace. And I know
Yeah,
that
that's good.
sounds really, really deep. And when I read that at first, I was like, what is this man talking about? And he kind of unpacks it a little bit more throughout a couple of different chapters, but I believe he said biblical leadership is weighty, but it's also holy. Um,
Let's like unpack this for a minute because this is where I think on it's like we've been so brainwashed by culture
mhm,
to, and you guys are going to hear me say this so much because this is the biggest thing that unhooked me from New Age is that culture in New Age teaches us to be selfish
mhm,
and self-absorbed.
mhm,
And I think that what makes a really good husband and a really good wife and a good parent is the ability to not be selfish
mm,
and to die to ourselves. And I think that that's why people have a hard time following Christ and following, like, really giving themselves to Jesus. We were talking about this the other day on our walk, where it's like we've been, it's a meism, like we're so hooked into the me of things,
mhm.
where when we hear that, when we're like, to die to myself, no, I need to self preserve, I need to self reflect, I need to, self heal, I need to
Yeah,
do self help and personalization and or like personal development and all of these things. It's all about self.
that's so funny because
And you have that written
yeah,
down.
well, he mentions that in a few different areas and also a few different contexts. Um, and specifically like in this section, masculine leadership and the feminine design. He mentioned that Peter commands husbands to live with their wives in an understanding way, and that's actually First Peter chapter 3
Yeah,
verse 7,
that's a good one.
um, which means leadership. And essentially, what he said here was leadership is marked by empathy and honor. Um, and the author warns that modern men often fail into two traps: domination or passivity. Um, True masculine leadership avoids both. So I can't. It's not that I can't speak from like the feminine lens, but I'll let you kind of take that, and I guess I'll speak from the more masculine side. But um, yeah, he said true masculine leadership avoids both. It is courageous and compassionate. When a husband disciplines his eyes, heart, and habits, he builds an atmosphere of safety where his wife can flourish. In contrast, much like you were saying, today's cultural ideologies push self worship and autonomy. Um, and the author notes that our generation confuses equality and sameness.
Mm,
God created man and woman equal in worth, but distinct in role.
yeah. Lack of order creates chaos and confusion.
Mm, yeah.
That's what I have in my notes. Lack of order creates chaos and confusion. I had a woman reach out to me. I did a talk on like a summit, and it was like a womb summit and like feminine embodiment. I've actually chosen, I'd recently just turned one down because it's going to land on deaf ears. So I turned it down, and then I did a training, and she was like, God's going to put you in rooms where you have to spread the message. But
Mm,
anyway, it didn't feel aligned because truthfully, there's kind of like a lack of ROI on a lot of those. And I
mm-hmm,
feel like God's like really wanting me to be intentional with my time.
mm-hmm,
Um, and so I was in the summit, and this girl reached out to me, and I basically talked about submitting to God and like submitting to the Father, submitting ourselves fully instead of self worship, which is taught a lot in like the womb worship spaces. You're worshiping self, it's all about self pleasure, self ideolatry, like all of that. And this woman reached out to me, and it was so beautiful because I really do appreciate when people reach out and ask questions, you know? But it was like there was a disconnect. It couldn't fully land because she was still hooked in this idea that there's no hierarchy.
mm,
And I'm thinking to myself, like, that is, I think what we fear is this hierarchy. But the thing is like, there is hierarchy, there is order. Well, hierarchy creates order, you know.
mm-hmm,
So when you have a husband who's covering the home, who's protecting the home, who's leading the home, not from, and I love that of it's been, I don't remember how you said it, it's like domination or passivity.
mm-hmm.
Like that's, we see that all the time, babe. Like
Yeah.
we see, I was raised in a home where the masculine was dominant,
Mm-hmm,
right? And it was fear based and very controlling. That was then my relationship with God the Father, and why I separated myself from the church and went into New Age, went into spirituality in that way. And I think a lot of women can relate to that, but the passivity is what I see more often than anything. And for example, watching that woman from church get into the car and drive when there's like
yeah.
5 kids. This is like my thing. You guys are going to think I'm crazy. Actually, both of us, like
Yeah.
we cannot. With ladies, you should not be driving the car when your husband's in the car with you unless he is ill. Unless he is ill or his eyes just got dilated.
Yeah, maybe he had bad vision that night. It was late when we got out of church. Um,
No excuse. Well,
it's
maybe.
that's it's an interesting it's an interesting observation where because I feel like in some unconscious way that sort of says very loudly the dynamic in the relationship,
Who's in
right? Who's
control?
in control? Who's I don't want to say who wears the pants, but who wears the pants, right?
Yeah.
It's
No, it's so
like
true.
you're not anywhere we go,
I don't
even if
drive.
you come and pick me up, the first thing we do is switch. You get in the passenger seat,
Yeah.
right?
I also have learned this too because I'm a backseat driver.
Oh, the worst.
Absolutely. But the when I'm a worse backseat driver, it is because I am not trusting you,
Mm,
and I'm usually wanting to control something external
yeah.
instead. And I've had to like practice this because I just I get anxious in the car. Number one, just my whole life isn't like that's how I see it. And this is like why we're talking about taking the pressure off. Um, I see it as like, well, now it's my responsibility to hold the most precious things in my life.
Mm,
If anything happens, like, and a woman's mind cannot, this is actually scientifically, psychologically proven, we are not designed for stressful situations. We can't handle it the same way. Like if we go into battle or war, I wouldn't know what to do. Like remember when Elliot, so we went a few, I'm like jumping here, but I'm doing the weave. Is
the
that what it's
weave.
called?
Yeah.
We went to a cheer competition earlier this year, and we booked a hotel that had like a wait, like a little water park. And Elliot's a really good swimmer, and we were in the wave pool, but she went past the buoys because she's a curious kid. And Justin and like the wave pool's kind of sucking her under. Justin calmly just gets up and walks and grabs her. I am frozen in time. I'm like frozen. And maybe not all women are like this, but I'm very much like in my feminine where I'm just like, I don't know what to do in those situations. I either freak out or like I'm frozen in time. So the car example is a great thing because in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is my pressure. Obviously, I can drive a car and I drive all the time to go pick Elliot up from school, take her to cheer, things like that. I'm a more cautious driver. I'm a slow driver. Like, I'm very much, I don't have depth perception. Like, I'm not the best, okay? But I have to trust you to get us from point A to B. You're more like risky in driving. Like, you're like kind of like weaving and swerving and like, but
When
you,
you say risky, I say decisive.
he's decisive. Exact. Okay, so that's it. That's masculine leadership. Is like, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. I'm just gonna go slow and be like aware. And this is it. People that like aren't getting this, they're gonna be like, she's dumb. But no, it's like, my brain doesn't work like that. Whereas you're like decisive, you're aggressive. You like, my dad used to always say that when he was teaching me how to drive, but he couldn't teach me how to drive because he was too angry. But he used to always say, like, you have to drive aggressively. Like, you can't be a passive driver.
Right.
And anyway, so that's probably why I've also gone into like 4 or 5 accidents. But you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and it's actually a great analogy. And
But
in all fairness, the whole backseat driving, yeah, it's been a thing our whole relationship. So I've been dealing with it for 14 years. You know, it's like
yeah,
a
but the
car's 600 yards up and has their brake lights on it. Yeah, it's like a thing. It's like a
oh,
visceral,
shit.
it's a visceral response every time, as if grabbing like the door handle, like
It's
it's
gonna
gonna,
save my life.
like it's gonna do something anyways. But in all fairness, I have been known. I hate Google Maps. I always drive as if I know where I'm going, and sometimes I don't. I feel like there's something just instinctual as a man where it's just like, and egotistical as well, where it's like you just always feel like you know where you're going. So even if I don't, I just play it off like I know where I'm going. And I've been known to miss a few exits here and there. Okay, so
I know, but
um,
I think it is. It's like, this is how people are running their homes. Like, this
right.
right here is a great analogy of how people are running their homes, where women are driving
Hmm.
and they're controlling,
Hmm.
or they're playing backseat driver, and their husbands are trying to drive, their husbands are trying to lead, and they're in the backseat like, don't turn there, don't do this, you're doing it wrong,
Well,
you're driving
yeah,
right, and it's
if that's a regular thing in the car, I would assume that that translates into the home as well.
mhm.
I would assume that. I think it's safe to assume that that probably bleeds into um, the framework of your relationship. I would say.
What does that do to men when women are like that?
Well, it's super frustrating, obviously, um, and it doesn't make us perform any better. That's for sure, right? That's
Yeah.
the biggest thing. Is it constant critique and nagging, if you will, does not make us perform any better. If anything, it jumpstarts the ego and it makes us not it almost makes us not want to do it at all. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Um,
That's where I think men have become passive. I
for
feel like
sure.
because of feminism and hyper independence and women being trained, and it is a training that has happened over the past centuries. Feminism is nothing new. I would suggest to everyone you read 2 books, Occult Feminism and Eve in Exile.
Mm,
Occult feminism, especially if you're hooked in New Age, because you have to understand that the New Age movement is not new. It's been around for centuries. It's been around since Moses. Like,
that's deep.
it's very deep. And there's a reason why it's infiltrated marriages and the home. When I read Occult Feminism, it was like everything that I was praying for discernment on. God was like, well, here's the book. You
Hmm.
want to know about it? Here's the goddess worship. Here's the womb worship. Here's the satanic rituals. Here's all those things. And some of you are like, no, it's not. It is very demonic. The cult is very demonic.
Hmm.
And those new age practices are very demonic, but what it teaches women is to be self-absorbed, hyper independent and controlling, and it's creating passive men that don't trust their own leadership. So the hierarchy, the order of God's design is completely hijacked. The thing is in Genesis, when I think I have this here, it says in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, it says, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. So God's telling us God also created Eve as a helper, not that she's less than, not that she's subordinate, but because God realized that a man cannot create, multiply, and be fruitful. We talked about this on the last episode without the helper. The helper is so important that Jesus states over and over again in the Gospels, I will send to you a helper in which my spirit will dwell with you.
Mm,
That is the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is equal to Jesus and God. The Holy Spirit is God. So, this idea that because we're helpers, because as women, and the way that we help is so good. We were talking about like how, you wouldn't be so spiritually led right now if it wasn't for my help in that journey,
for sure.
so I think like we have to step away from that. And honestly, as women, and I always go hard on the women because I love women. I love you all so much, but the cultural brainwash that has happened to us is ruining men.
Yeah, and it's not by coincidence.
It is by design 1000%. And that's why I say it's demonic, because it's not of God. It's not of God. It completely inverts God's design for marriage.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, those, I mean, I haven't read those books, but some of the things that you've told me from those two books you mentioned, even if you have no intention of leaving the new age movement or whatever you want to refer to it as, it's always good to have both sides of the stories, right? It's like politics. I don't agree with a lot of the things, and not to get political, but
Yeah.
a lot of the rhetoric that comes from the left doesn't resonate with me, and I don't agree with. But I still entertain the idea of it because I think it's important to see where both sides of the coin are,
Yeah.
because the truth is oftentimes somewhere in the middle of that, right?
Yeah.
And um, I lost my train of thought. I had something I was going to pull from here, and
Yeah.
I have too many notes.
You
Too many
need
notes.
them bullet pointed.
Yeah.
So it says, so I looked up the statistics on this. Speaking of New Age, it said 70% of women hold New Age belief compared to 50% of men. And when I read this, we were talking about this on our walk of how a lot of women from my world, they always struggle to pull their men into like their spiritual practices.
Yeah.
And you said something that I thought was quite profound, where you basically said that it was because like it's ungrounded, it's not tangible, it's not rooted in anything, it's very like esoteric,
Yeah.
mystical. But what's funny is so many of the women in New Age, they try to get, I call them spiritual fuck boys. I usually don't cuss, so I'll just say F boys, but they're spiritual F boys who I'm
Jeez,
trying
we might
to,
have to blip that out. Keep going.
I
Sorry.
know. We're trying really hard not to cuss. But anyway, so spiritual F boys, where they're hyper feminized and they're like in this new age kind of worlds, but they're like so aloof to life. And these women are trying to date these men because they're spiritually conscious and they're ascended. But then you have like polygamy, you have what is it, where like it's three people,
Polygamy.
polygamy,
Yeah.
or like open relationships, which it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Or yeah,
Give me a
thruples.
long-term relationship that's like a throuple that's working.
No, somebody's always going to get the short end of the stick in those situations. I don't care how fluid you are. It's just,
But that fluidity doesn't serve us. Like, and I think that because you said something, it's, like I've shared with you, like my coaching practice is changing where it's ministering to women who are leaving New Age and coming back to Christ.
mm-hmm.
Um, you can stay in New Age if you want to. You have free will. God's given us free will. You don't have to like come to Jesus. But there's a lack of freedom in that. And I think that it's the same thing within our marriage. If we can submit to God's order and design for marriage, there's freedom in that. Because one thing that you have said is that when a man leads, it creates peace within the home for the woman.
Yeah.
And when women are constantly in that control mechanism and constantly like trying to fix, like how much freedom did you feel from me 2 years ago as opposed to now? when I was like constantly healing and like in these deep initiations and descents.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a stark difference for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
In which ways?
I feel like you in a lot of ways are much more grounded,
Mm,
and you seem much more at peace with yourself, um, which I think is important because as much of a hierarchy as there is, it's kind of like an unspoken hierarchy where you and I are both on the same page about our roles. Um, with that said, I think in a lot of ways we feed off of each other,
mm-hmm,
right? And I think that's really cool. I think that's like an awesome aspect to our relationship because it's like when one of us are down or one of us are struggling, one of us is very keen to that. And we're
mm-hmm,
also very quick to just pick each other back up.
mm,
You know what I mean? And I think if one person in the relationship is just extremely fluid and there's no set foundation, it's just that person's it's they're kind of all over the place. You know
mm-hmm,
what I mean? And like how can you, if you're operating from that space, how are you able to pull your partner out of bad state of mind, or if they're struggling with whatever the case is, work, um, parenting, their aspect in the relationship. If someone's just all over the place and unrooted and just living in chaos essentially, um, how are you supposed to be support? How are you
mm-hmm.
supposed to support your partner,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, maybe that, I don't know if that exactly ties in, but that's what comes to mind for me.
Mm-hmm. Like you feel, well, I think it's like I'm not so self-obsessed with my healing.
Mm,
And I'm not so fixated on like I need to get to, and even like in business, like this is the craziest thing for me right now is like I am not trying to get somewhere in business.
mm,
Like I'm really just like, what do you, like, God, how do you want me to serve right now? And it's not so much of get like getting through a launch or like get like it's so, but it's like weird almost in my nervous system where I feel like where I was I was always trying to like initiate, get to the next level. It was like this constant chase.
mm.
And I think that that's the difference between coming to Jesus and why I want women to see this and like pull themselves out of the distortion is because it like there's just like such steadiness in Christ. Like when you give your life to Jesus, when you submit fully as a for anyone, like even for men, it's just like you've just like you've laid your own will, you've laid your own life, you've laid the business, you've laid like the marriage, you've laid the family down, and it's like you're not doing anything from your own will. You're doing it because God's guiding you in that, you know?
Yeah, no, and that's, it just creates like that sense of inner peace, I
Yeah.
think, and just seems smooth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just there's very rarely any disruptions. Um, yeah, and it provides a sense of peace over just everything,
Yeah.
our marriage, parenting, all of it.
Yeah. So did you want to touch on any of this of like um the feminizing of the role of men and like I feel like right now, and this is something that like actually makes me really, really sad because I feel like we're in a time in history and in culture where we need strong men.
Hmm.
And I think we need them more than anything within, like, it all starts in the family. I think that there's, Pastor Daryl said something that like really hit me last night, where he said, like, where you put your attention is what you worship.
Mm.
And I feel like right now men are not putting their attention towards Jesus, and men are also not like putting their attention fully towards their family and towards their wives.
Hmm.
And I don't know what men are doing, you know. And I feel like right now we just like are living in a world where especially in the US like men are just so feminized right now. They're so passive. We see it all the time when we go out. We see just weak men. And I say this with so much love. This is not, I'm so much nicer to the men than the women. I can like hear it in my voice. Like I feel sad for men right now. I think men are more likely to commit suicide. I feel like men right now are struggling with just identity. They're struggling with their roles. They're struggling with strength. I feel like if men are strong, they are condemned in this society. Like you have a strong man that is leading and he's a misogynist, he's XYZ,
Hmm.
he's controlling. And I guess like I don't like where what needs to happen. Like you're a man, what needs to happen? Like what do you notice? What do you see? You know?
Yeah, there's definitely the feminization of men, and I think that looks very different for every man out there. I don't think that's the only issue. I think that is an aspect to it. I think the passiveness or the passivity of men is maybe the bigger issue, um, because I think men have just been beaten down and we've been labeled, and much like you talk about the rise of feminism, and we've kind of just been put to the wayside. And I think in a lot of ways, men have just not only checked out, but I think they've just removed themselves from the equation altogether. You know what I mean? It's like they're just out doing their own thing. They're not, and I'm sure there are men out there that are trying their best in terms of trying to find a good woman and better themselves, because there's a little bit of a rise in that right now too. And I don't agree with a lot of the people that are, trying to encourage these men to go about it the right way. The people like the Andrew Tate
Mm-hmm.
and people like that. What's the other guy's name? Myron. I don't
But
know.
those men aren't like rooted in Jesus.
No, exactly.
So
So
it's
it's
weak leadership.
yeah, and it's like the pendulum swings, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's you're just not going about it the right way. It is an extremity. But apart from the men that are out there trying to better themselves and actually looking for a good woman and wanting to start a family, I think more than anything, men have just completely checked out. They've removed themselves from the conversation. They're not out there looking for women. They're not out there because that's where it starts. If you can't find a good woman, how do you, how can you create a family? You know what I mean? And how do you pull all of this in if you're not in a relationship? You know what I mean? So it's
Mm-hmm.
just like I think men with that, they've checked out, they're doing their own things, they're in the gym, whatever, smoking weed, drinking, partying, playing video games, whatever. It's just like they're out there just kind of floating around. Um, to that, I would say, like, what do you really have to lose by turning to God
Mm-hmm.
or going to church? And I think we're starting to see it, especially just with all the things that have happened, like the Charlie Kirk thing and just the times that we're in right now. Our church is growing.
Mm-hmm.
Our church is getting bigger. There's more and more people showing up on Saturday nights, and
There's a lot of young men showing up.
exactly. So it's
There's a
like,
lot of men solo, like right in front of
yeah,
us. It was actually the sweetest thing. These two guys sat right in front of us. We always sit towards the front. They sat right in front of us, and during one of the worship songs, this guy broke down, like
yeah,
probably in his early 30s, our age,
yep,
and just like broke down. And you could just like see that the Holy Spirit was moving in him,
yeah. I
you know?
think I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if it's the vulnerability piece or it's just like men are hurting right now, and you show up at a place like that where it's just there's so much unconditional love and there's so much um, just connection, and there's no judgment there. It's like everybody's there for the same reason. That's like one of the reasons I love church and love going to church, and that's probably why I feel like my cup's always full when we leave,
Mm-hmm.
because it creates that environment, you know. And I think that's a big component of it too. It's like men don't have that community. They don't have that connection, that sense of like belonging.
Yeah.
It's you really have to work hard as a man to find that. And I'm not talking about just being with your boys and being with your good friends that you met in high school or in college, and just being around a group of individuals that are all kind of living the same life, where it's just kind of going through life aimlessly. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? But yeah, it was really cool to see that guy because he shed some tears, and you can tell it was just like whatever was going on with him, something hit home with him.
Yeah,
You
there was
know,
a lot of people actually crying
for sure.
yesterday. Um, I yeah, this is so good because I feel like men are coming back to their masculine headships and their leadership, and I feel like men have to fight for it right now. Like you have to fight for your role. One of my favorite things that you do with me is when you tell me no or you tell me to like you direct me in our marriage.
Mm,
I because it's like the weight that I carry is quite different than I think the weight that you carry,
hmm
and there's like a direction sometimes that I need from you in order to like settle myself.
mm,
So I think like for men it's like you cannot be afraid to speak up in your marriage.
mm.
And I think that kind of going back to like that statistic with like women in new age versus men in new age and like having that belief, I there's well I'm hesitant. I think that there's a part of me that wishes you would have been like, hey, like you're like kind of going like where are you going,
Mm.
I also think that I needed to come to that realization myself. And when I felt the presence of God come in and Jesus call me by name and pull me out of it, um I'm so grateful for that. But even that was like such a healing of that masculine wounding that I felt of like, you need to like come out, like you need to come back into reality a little bit.
Yeah.
But I feel like with men, it's like you kind of have to like reposition. How do I want to say this? I feel like men have to posture their hearts towards Christ so that they can reposition their wives. And I think the reason why I'm hesitant to say that is because I know how that can be received for some people,
hmm
especially for women that are still hooked in that of I don't need a man to posture me or position me.
hmm
But if we're talking about spiritual warfare on the home and the need for revival, the need for families coming back to Jesus, we need men to posture their hearts back to Christ and for them to take leadership and to position their wives back in the home.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, because what comes to mind for me immediately is looking back on it, I do think there were some amazing things that came from that point in time that you're talking about, and I do think in a lot of ways you had to experience it to know that it wasn't for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it also makes me think, well, at that point in time, I was just kind of moving through life aimlessly.
Mm-hmm.
I had an amazing job, was, making six figures, and work was solid, but at home, it was just kind of aimlessly floating, and it brings in like that passivity piece where it's like if maybe I was rooted in Christ and had the connection with God and everything that we have currently, I probably would have pulled you out of that,
Mm-hmm.
had I not been so passive.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize I was kind of hands off with all of that at that point in time,
Yeah.
and it's crazy because when we were struggling in our relationship, I had things misconstrued and kind of like inverted in the sense where it was like work was the piece that was chaotic and wasn't rooted and grounded at work, and I thought my home life was good.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually the opposite, where
Mm-hmm.
it was like I had work dialed in and was rooted in what I was doing at work, but at home it was just chaos. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's interesting. So, something from this book that the author put in there. He said, "A man who submits first to Christ becomes a vessel of peace in his home, anchoring his family in stability and love."
Mhm.
And I think that peace does start with the men in the home,
Mhm.
you know? And if you want to lead in your home, and you say this all the time, it's like, how can you expect a woman, your wife, to submit to you if you're not fully submitted to God?
Mhm.
I think it's a little unfair
Mhm.
because to me it makes sense. That's where it starts, right? As
Mhm.
somebody with strong leadership skills has to be led by somebody,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So who better than God?
Yeah.
I think it's only fair.
Well, then your ego comes in, your mind comes in, your feet, like we're broken, and I think like we talked about laying down our life. Like the thing is like we are broken, like we have sin, we do sin,
Hmm.
and um, it's having God lead a man is just like it's almost like the man can lead from a clear space instead of like this wounded space.
Yes. Yeah. From your purest intentions,
Yeah.
it takes all of that other nonsense out of the
But
equation.
the direction is clear too. It's like because God's guiding the path. Like
Hmm.
you've laid again, like you're laying down your own will so that God can come in and he can guide your path. And I'm thinking of just like Jesus did this. Like this is the craziest thing. It's so interesting to me because it's like Jesus, we're going to do an episode. I started pulling together notes for this, talking about like who Jesus actually is and dismantling like Christ consciousness and New Age, and like Jesus was just a guru and all of that. Jesus was God, and what's so cool to me is that Jesus was God, and yet he constantly submitted himself to the Father.
That's what I'm looking at right now. So essentially, what you just said, submission is the discipline of grace.
Mm-hmm.
Even Christ submitted to the Father without losing equality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have that in my notes. That's so funny.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Okay, so I want to just like run through some of these points for you guys so that you have a clear path with this. My first point is, and again, this is Jesus even quotes Genesis. So there's validity in this because it doesn't just come from Peter and Paul, it's coming from the Old Testament. And then Jesus also talks about marriage in his ministry, and he quotes in Matthew 19 verses 5 through 6. He says, "For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh." I also want to say this as well because we don't really have this. Like your family's in Ohio. You've
Mhm.
never, I think, since the time we got together, you always put me first. Men, you got to leave mama and you have to choose your wife. Like you have to stick up for your wife is your prized possession. In Proverbs, it says that a godly wife, a woman that is submitted to God, is more precious than jewels.
Mm.
Like she is the crown that you wear. If we're talking about kingdom marriages and building a kingdom legacy, like your wife is the most precious thing. And you have to, Jesus says it is a command of the Lord that you have to choose her above everything, above your family, above your friends, and vice versa. And that is how you become one flesh. So it says, therefore what God has joined together, let no one separate. So the first thing, and you said this, is headship does not equal tyranny.
Mhm.
The head is servant leadership, and that's what you were talking about, is how men were your servants to God. You're not doing this out of your own will. You're not the one that, and I think this also helps take that weight off of it, like that pressure of fatherhood, the pressure of being the husband, the pressure of the world. Give it to God. Like I just don't understand like why we carry so many of our own burdens. Like
Mm.
give it to God, like the financial pressure, all of it. Just give it to God,
Mm,
Um, and Jesus shows us that. Like Jesus was a servant to God. He was God, and also he was in service to God in his plan. Again, so much so that he died on the cross, that he suffered and died on the cross. And he says it at the very end. He has a moment of, questioning if God abandoned him, and he struggled with it. Like, I think too, this is like where men have to realize, like, it is a struggle. This idea that life is going to be easy. Again, it's like this new age, like everything's kumbaya, life is just easy the more you ascend. It's a lie. I don't know. It's weird to me. Again, I used to like fall into it, but this is what makes passive men is this like men are like now afraid to like struggle and do hard things. That's weird to me. Like life's carry that burden, and then allow your wife to be a safe space for you to retreat and for you to lay your head and for you to rest, and like women, like that's your job. That's what we mean by servant. In Hebrew, it translates to Ezra, or Ezer. And like that's where you come in, is like if your husband doesn't trust you enough to lay down his burdens, where you're meeting him with non-judgment and you're just meeting him with love and wisdom, then you're failing as a wife.
mm.
Like we how many times you just come, like, I are you ever afraid to come to me and be like, I'm struggling? Or like, I hope not. If you are, we need to talk. I think there's times, go on.
I think there's a fine line.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that kind of goes back and touches on a lot of the unspoken kind of roles we have in our relationship, where you're a pretty intuitive person. So, usually if I start to get in my head or struggle with certain things, you usually pick up on it pretty quick, and you're usually pretty quick to pull me out of it. Um, and I guess it's subjective, like little nuances and little things I struggle with. No, I don't come running to you each and every time where I'm like, oh, I'm struggling.
Yeah,
You know what I
that's
mean?
true.
It's like
Yeah, that's true.
the little pressures. Like last night was just like, man, I have so much stuff to do for school.
Hmm.
Um, and it was a little rocky last night after church with Elliot, and it was like whatever. But I took the dog outside, brought Elliot back inside, and I went on like a 20-30 minute walk last night. It was like 10:30 at night, and
I know I checked your location.
I took it to God first.
Yeah.
I went and walked and just had a conversation with God.
Yeah.
But to some extent, Pastor Darrell has brought this up many times in the past, and it's like at the end of the day, we're built for it. I know it
Mhm.
doesn't always feel that way when you're struggling with things, no matter what it is, but at the end of the day, we are built for it.
Yeah.
And the burdens that you were talking about it is a privilege. It is a blessing. Pressure is a privilege. Um, and yeah, I mean, I just want to throw that out there and let the other, all the men out there, whoever's listening, if you're a man and you're struggling with things, that's okay. It's okay to struggle.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, like I think men should know that we are built for the pressure,
Hmm.
you know. But to answer your question, no, I don't always come running. It's I do think that there are things that you can help with, and I do think that in a lot of ways and a lot of times you're able to kind of paint the bigger picture,
Hmm.
and instead of focusing like on all these little nuances and the things that seem to be problematic, a lot of times they're really not that problematic. It's just
Yeah.
like the more you let them run rampant inside of your mind, and then they grow and they grow and grow, and it's like being able to just have the mentality to kind of snap out of it and just be like, okay, these issues really aren't that big. And that's just me personally. Everyone's situation is different. I don't know what everybody's struggling out there with, but for me, I always take them to God first. And if it's something that is too big to talk to God about, then Yeah, I may continue to stew on them, but I don't come running to you with all of my little
That's a good
problems.
that's a good correction. I guess I didn't mean like all the problems. I think it's like you trust me enough to like be a counselor, or not a counselor, like a counsel, to be part of your counsel.
No, for
You know what I'm
sure.
saying?
If there are things, because you bring such a different perspective to the
Mhm.
table, and you bring what your perspective is that you bring to the table is like things through a feminine lens.
Mhm.
So it's like you're very good at balancing that. You're very good at you're for using your term counseling and giving advice without mothering me, if
Mm.
that makes sense, right? I
Yeah.
don't need to be mothered. Um, and sometimes I just need to be told how it is. And sometimes I do need softness. Sometimes I do just need to just vent and get some things off my chest. You know
Or
what I mean?
sometimes you just need like a head rub.
Yeah, or sometimes it's just like a little bit of connection. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Um, but no, it's like I don't. I told you the other day before we recorded one of our podcasts, and like, you know what? I had that moment where just like, do I even qualify to be doing this? You know what I
Mhm.
mean? We're so like, I feel so early on in our journey, and there's, you know, people that, you know, I think of um, someone like Taylor Welch, who
Mhm.
is extremely, extremely knowledgeable
Yeah.
and just a wealth of knowledge, and somebody that's just so spiritually deep and knowledgeable. You know what I mean? It's like very easy to talk yourself out of things. And I guess that comes to brings it back to like the worthiness piece. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And I remember I brought that to you. I'm like, you know, I had that moment where I'm like, that lack of worthiness. Like, am I even good enough to be doing this? Like, people even care what I'm gonna have to say? You know what I mean?
We're gonna find out.
We'll find out for sure. But then it's like, you know, you shift perspectives, and it's like you said, it's not necessarily about us. This isn't for us.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's just like we're trying. We've chosen a way that we can kind of give back, but also give all the glory to God.
Mhm.
You know, and we've experienced so much, and we're still, as I mentioned in the last podcast or the one before that, we're still building the plane as we're flying it. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of ways, sometimes that's the best way to get information is through people that are actually going through all the nuances in life, and people that are still early on in their faith and dealing with the struggles, and they're still fresh and they're still in real time. um, and you were just like, yeah, this, you have to take you out of it because it's not about you. It's
Mhm.
about what we're doing and the bigger message, which is ultimately to give it to God,
Mhm.
and just to bring people closer to God and bring God into the livelihoods and people's marriage and their relationships and their parenting and, you know, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I like that correction. I feel like a lot of men, I also think men process in solitude with God, you know?
Mm.
Whereas women, like, we love to talk, we love to like process out loud, you know? There's definitely moments, but even like when I'm praying, like I'm talking to God, like I need to converse with you, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
And I think in a lot of ways, like as men, we're the problem solvers, and it's a little counterintuitive to be the quote unquote problem solver in the relationship, and that's a role that you play as the man, but seemingly bringing problems. You know what I mean? Bringing
yeah,
problems to your wife.
because then it brings a burden onto the wife, and
Well,
that's
yeah,
where
and then
we,
it you know, I think that sometimes can cause your partner, your wife, to kind of question your leadership, and then
that's good.
it kind of brings in that safety piece, right? Where
Mm,
it's like, well, if he's struggling, worried about all of these little nuances, you know, I don't want to be too brash here, but
yeah.
I think subconsciously or even consciously, that's going to make your partner, your woman, be like, wow, um, can I trust this man's leadership? You
Mm,
know.
yeah, that's good. So let me know when you're ready. Okay.
Yeah, I think that was the. These are the notes.
Is this where we were?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, why not?
Okay. Our camera died, so we're coming back. And I think we were leaving, you were talking about how you don't bring everything to me and you bring it to God first, and that pressure, giving it to God, and how that creates safety within marriage
Mm-hmm.
for women.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I want to bring it home,
Okay.
land the plane. Does that feel good? Um, had already mentioned like the headship does not equal tyranny piece, like just the main points for them to take home.
I don't know. That was almost 2 hours ago, an hour and a half ago.
Okay, let's just drive home these key points. So the first one is that headship does not equal tyranny, and that men, your role as a leader comes from you being a servant to God. And that means you essentially what Justin was saying of you giving it all to God first. And um, the body for women, because my women, we love our bodies as needed, but you're creating the body of the home. You're creating the atmosphere. You're setting the tone. You're setting the pace. You're essentially, making your home a sanctuary for your husband, a safe place for him to land when he comes home so that the pressure that he is carrying in the home is not so heavy there,
Mm.
right? I didn't add this because we were just talking until we realized the camera died. But 1 Peter chapter 3 verses 1 through 7 says, "Wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husband, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker vessel, and as heirs with you of a gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers." I love this verse so much, and I feel like it's going to tie everything together because as when Peter says, uh, we win our men over, and like this is for all the women out there. Sometimes the things left unsaid, the things that are not spoken, and just like the energy that we show up, the presence that we bring within our marriage, that's the most impactful thing. You don't have to like, I get this question a lot is like, how do I make my man more spiritual or more godly? And you can't. I think it's going to drive them away. But you can, just with your presence, your state of being, your devotion to God, I think draws men in, right? Do you say that?
Yeah, maybe easier said than done.
Yeah.
Maybe trying to drop breadcrumbs, and
Hmm.
figure out how to pull curiosity out of your partner, out of your husband, rather than just trying to force feed them.
Yeah, that's good.
Because if there's already resistance there to begin with, you're just going to push your husband away,
Mm,
especially if you continue to make it a big deal. When you overemphasize and you hound and you nag, it's just going to drive them further away. Um, Again, easier said than done because it's something I've always been curious about. I've always been curious about spirituality in general. I think I've always had questions prior to even meeting you. So I was already curious.
hmm.
Um, but I will say that when you were deep in your spiritual practices, I definitely felt like there was something on my end that was lacking. Not that it created like, animosity or jealousy or anything like that, but um, I would encourage women or the wives out there to maybe sprinkle in those breadcrumbs,
Hmm.
just things that they can try to, make their partners or their husbands a little curious.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love just like the call in for men here to treat wives as respect. And when he says the weaker vessels, men, just like we were talking about, like dying to yourself and, putting your life down for your wife or your family. That's exactly what it is. Like, and we were talking about like driving the car, like you are in control, you are in the driver's seat. And us as women, we are more fragile by nature. We
Hmm.
can't like deny biology, you know, like we are the weaker vessel. There's things that I just physically cannot do that you can do. And also spiritually as well, as it's that burden that you take on.
Hmm.
So I think that that's really beautiful. But also seeing the women as just like gracious gifts. Proverbs talk about this. I can't remember if I talked about this, if I'm repeating myself, because I don't remember what I was saying before the camera died. But in Proverbs, it talks about like the most precious thing a man can have is a godly woman, as a woman who's submitted to God, a woman that is mindful with her words, with her intentions, with the way she speaks, the way she moves, the way she walks into a room, just that feminine presence that we bring as wives. And for a husband to see that as value, and I feel like men like say that to your wives. I think that men, as women, we want to hear that. We want to know that you are just like happy to be with us and that we're doing enough, and like you, not from a prideful stance, but just from like an awe, like there's an awe and a reverence with what we're actually providing and giving, especially for the women who are at home and are holding that stance of homemaker and mother and wife, and maybe they've put their business or their careers to the side so that they can like really hold that posture. It feels really good just to hear like, I see everything that you're doing, because society doesn't do that. We like have oddly shamed women for that role.
Yeah, we've definitely robbed women of that. It's yeah, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
So the second piece that I want you all to take away from this is and we've talked about this so much, but just submission is not slavery. It's not you as women being weaker or small. And the same thing for men. It's not taking your power away for you to submit yourself to Christ, for you to submit yourself to God. I think it actually brings a lot more power in. And the same thing goes for women submitting to to your husbands. It's bringing power, that union together. There's just like a force field of creation that you're stepping into together. So you had said something about this with like this submission, um, where, what
yeah,
was it?
biblical submission doesn't erase a woman's voice or value; it elevates her influence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I wanted you to say. That's so good. Biblical submission doesn't erase a woman's voice or value, it elevates her influence. And that I did a whole thing when I did, remember that like free, it was a low cost actually, um, just teaching that I did on feminine restoration. I said that of like, that's why influencers are so big right now, but influencers are mainly women because women hold influence.
Mm.
That's why when I talk about feminism, it's influence culture, it's influence the home, it's influence our posture in marriage.
Yeah, no, I mean that's one of the notes that I put here too. I think kind of ties in with what you're saying. When a wife yields her will to God's structure, she finds freedom, not bondage.
Mm,
Her trust invites her husband to rise to integrity and lead with love.
yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's so good. So the third thing is accountability and humility are built in these biblical relationships. So I think that we're humbling ourselves within the marriage, right? It's again, we're not taking a posture of selfishness. We're taking a posture of I'm willing to die to myself for Christ, for God, and for our union. Like we're not selfish within our marriage. And it does hold us accountable. It means, you have to be disciplined as well.
Mm.
I have to be disciplined. I have to show up in the marriage. I can't just give 50% of myself. I have to give all of myself to you and vice versa. And that means, we talked about this on the last episode, that means taking care of myself, nourishing my body, just making sure like I am in a good state of being,
Mm.
mind, body, soul, for you and vice versa,
Yeah,
you know?
it definitely goes both ways.
And also like lovingly correct. I love that you actually corrected me on this podcast so that they could see this of like, you know, just with that one piece of you going to God first and not bringing me all of your burden and all of your troubles,
Hmm.
so I don't have to hold that because I would become anxious and fearful. And I think we've had that dynamic before, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so order invites freedom, not bondage. We talked about that. And then the last thing is this is going to be big for some of you, but role abuse is sin. Role abuse is sin. I want to touch on this just for a quick moment. We'll go deeper into this, but women, the shadow and the dark feminine is manipulative. It talks about it in Psalms, it talks about it in Proverbs. Eve going and biting from the apple and wanting to become God. We're going to talk about that in the next episode when we talk about Jesus. That is manipulation, it is darkness, and it is the thing that actually biblically the Bible warns against when it comes to the feminine spirit. I had someone reach out to me back actually when I was in Nicaragua, and this girl, sweet girl, was like, "Yeah, I'm taking a course on like my dark feminine. What do you think about that?" And I was just like, "Yeah, I don't touch it. I don't touch the dark feminine because it's exactly that. It's dark, it's seductive, it's manipulative, and you can use that in your marriage in a very harmful way. And what it does is it actually takes men out of their masculine and out of their power.
Mm.
So I see it a lot with dating too, that happens. But in the same regard, husbands, you can't dominate your wives. you know you can't just think that because you're the head of the household they get no say, they get no voice. You're manipulating finances. I've heard that a lot, of manipulating finances. You're making women feel less than because they are the homemakers, because they are mothers. You're not supporting them in birth. We're going to do a whole podcast episode about birth. I'm really excited about that. But like, you're not supporting them in birth, you're not supporting them in pregnancy, you're not supporting them postpartum or just like in the home. You still have to be an active participant in the home as well. So
Yes.
that's not what we're talking about. That's all manipulation. It's all an inversion of truth. you know
Hmm.
Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say when you think authority or leadership in a marriage, you think of it as being marked by empathy and honor.
Mm,
Avoid the domination, avoid the passivity.
yeah, yeah, that's good. Yeah, like honoring your wife.
Yeah, authority is stewardship.
Yeah.
It's not status.
Yeah.
Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, I do. I like that. Yeah.
um,
Like, what does that mean to steward your authority? Like, to not like hold that as stat? Because that's how I feel like I was raised, is I witnessed a household where the authority was a status, not so much a stewardship. And it completely dismantled the well being of the people in the home.
it also creates, excuse me, like the animosity.
Mm.
Where that was probably a big hiccup for you in terms of rebelling against the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think it's like with great power comes great responsibility. I know that sounds super cliche, but it's more the authority and the stewardship in the marriage. It is a privilege. It is not to be abused. Um, I guess what I would say is
You give all of yourself to us. Like I think you need to realize that you give all of yourself to us at every single moment of your day. It is for us.
mm,
There's very few moments where you're selfish. I think you need to realize that.
mm,
you know do you ever feel like you need to give more?
give more.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's days where I could probably show up a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Yeah.
You know, be more or not passionate, but more patient. Um, yeah.
I think that's what it means to like humble yourself in the marriage and like in the inner union is like that feeling. I don't think a lot of men have that of like that, or they take that pressure of like, I feel like I can be doing more and they crumble under it.
Mm,
And that's where your relationship with God, with Christ comes in is like, yeah, you could always be doing more. And like, it's that wanting to do more as a husband, that I
hmm.
think makes a good husband,
Yeah.
you know? That's where it's like status is like ego of like, I don't need to do more. I'm already doing enough.
Mm,
It's kind of like what I was taking from that. Yeah. Okay. So our call to, we're going to leave this in. Is that okay?
sure.
Yeah. I feel like it's a little vulnerable. I feel like it's like what men struggle with is that, because that's what I could feel from you is like, are you stewarding enough? Like, are you enough in the marriage? I think a lot of men are struggling with that right now. Like, are they being good enough fathers? Are they being good enough husbands? You
It's
know?
yeah, it's always in the back. It's always
Yeah.
in the back of my mind for sure.
Yeah.
Like kind of yeah, like striving for perfection
Mm-hmm.
and being extremely well rounded in everything, finances, um, how you show up as a father, how you show up as a husband. Um, yeah, I think that's constant. I don't know if that ever really goes away. It's gotten easier to kind of keep it in check and
Mm-hmm.
in control over the years, but it's something that's always there. Um, and I can only speak from my experience, but especially not growing up with like a present dad. My real father wasn't around. Um, my stepfather he just worked, and beyond work, he was just kind of checked out. So, not really having like a clear role model or a clear model to, you know, kind of compare yourself to. Um, yeah, I don't know. This got really deep really quick. So,
Yeah, this is good. This is why we're doing this. Because I think what's hard about, and no one talks about this, and I learned this like I've been doing this for a while. You can't teach things. It's like the more that you teach things, the more you embody it. And you're constantly having that like gut check of like, it's almost as though you're taking what you read, you're taking what you're praying about, and you're bringing it to the forefront for people to hear about it. Truthfully, it's like that intimacy piece. I think a lot of men can relate to it. I think a lot of men are struggling with it. It's why we created the podcast, not for us to be a perfect couple or any of that. We're not perfect in this. We are, you know, deepening every single day our relationship with Christ. And we talked about this just I was in that training and we overheard that one gal speaking, and she gave her life, she got saved, she gave her life to Christ, and it wasn't easier after. It was hard.
mm,
Jesus will literally just pull apart everything that's not of him, so that we can serve him more humbly and more fully. And I think it's good. I think men need to hear that enoughness, that worthiness piece, like you've brought so many times. And this is in real time where the feminine steps in,
mm,
of just like pulling that out of you, and also just like reminding you, of how much you do for our family and
mm,
for me and for Elliot. And, it's just, yeah, I think it's really beautiful. I think a lot of people are going to resonate with it and also just like pull something from it. I
mm,
think men, as much as you're caring and yes, bring it to God, have your, other men that you can talk to. There is a wisdom that the feminine holds. There is a wisdom that especially your wife holds. And I think that is why we need that covering, because if we're in fight or flight, or if we're in survival mode, it's hard for us to bring that out.
mm,
So we have to be able to soften our hearts in order to also, serve our men. So it's just service in real time, being of service to you in real time, which I think people need to see.
Yeah,
I love you so much.
well said.
Yeah. So for the men, just your call to action, things that you as a couple can begin to do now for you to begin to implement. What I would say more than anything is, take today's episode and sit together, pray together, and really, think about your role. Think about, are you biblically aligned with God's design for what it means to be wife and husband? And I think sometimes that's a confronting thing, you know, because I know I haven't always been biblically aligned wife, you know. So for men, you want to read the men part? You want to speak to that?
Well, I think mine kind of overlapped with yours,
Yeah,
the show notes. And actually, I think before the camera died, I think you read this part actually.
yeah,
To step under Christ's covering and lead with humility, protect with prayer, and love with endurance. I also had the authority of stewardship, not status piece.
yeah, yeah, it's good. Yeah, and just like it's not about controlling your wife, it's not about controlling your home. Um, it's, in like the new age, it's like men lead, women surrender. And it's just like, no, we both need to surrender. Like both men and women have to surrender to God. It just doesn't work any other way. And
Mm-hmm.
this is, I think, the difference between new age relationships and Christ centered relationships is that the surrender is on both sides, you know. Um, so then for women, ladies, I just feel like we need to get better at like really resting and not fighting and being combative in the way that God designed us so perfectly. And God designed us for the home, God designed us for children, God designed us perfectly for holding, and we hold our family in nurturance and in love and compassion and that just like that deep wisdom. So instead of fighting and combating and like arguing and trying to fix your husband, bring that into the relationship, into the marriage.
Mm.
And then for couples, um, you guys are going to hear us say this: revival starts in the home. You want this world to heal, it starts in your home. So start living in this order, start seeing how you can just change like your daily habits, your daily way of being, and rearrange your marriage and ask God to rearrange your marriage. Ask God to, put your ego aside and your own will aside and ask Him to show you what it means for a husband to be the head, a husband to be the covering of the home, and then for the women, the wives, to be the body of the home. And yeah, see what changes. I would be curious. So I want to end in prayer.
Okay,
You want me in prayer?
sure.
Okay. Dear God, I just pray over our marriage, and I also pray over just all of the marriages and relationships that are tuning in and listening to Meet at the Well. God, I pray that you give men the strength, the provision, the protection, the trust, the love. And I pray that you give women just the feeling that they are covered, that they are safe, that they are so fully supported and provided for. And God, I pray that both begin to surrender so fully to you so that they can move in faithfulness with you, so that they can trust you. God, your grace is so good. Your glory is so good. And you're always providing, you're always showing us a way. So I pray that more couples, more marriages align their lives with biblical truth and with you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right.